So, okay, cool. So let's start with the first topic. So topic number one that I wanted to talk about was centered around multiple products sharing the same keyword intent. And so for the context of this, within the paid search world, specifically the search network, you'll have many different products, and you commonly kind of come across a scenario where you're running search campaigns. There are specific keywords, usually with broader intent, but not always, that the intent could be for more than one of your hero products that you're trying to sell. So there's many different kind of things that you could be doing in this particular case, but let me run through a few examples if you're not fully kind of understanding what I'm saying. So one example would be for, let's just say, dog beds. So you sell an elevated dog bed. Maybe you sell like 3 different types of elevated dog beds because you're just a pet supplies e-commerce store. You sell large dog beds, you sell raised dog beds, cooling dog beds, and everything in between in terms of like the different variations, maybe even different brands. So let's say your particular keyword that maybe in this case, it's a broader keyword, and you're just saying like dog bed or large dog bed. And it could be an elevated, it could be a raised, it could be a cooling, but there's a certain amount of search volume for particularly large dog beds. So that's one example on like a more of a broader case. And like in that particular scenario, I would say like get as granular as possible with like long tail keywords, but at the same time, there's volume for, say, just people looking for large dog beds, and they could be looking for elevated, raised, cushiony, cooling. There's just so many different types. The other example is a little bit of a trickier one where you're still getting really granular with the keyword. And one particular example of this is when somebody is looking for, let's say, organic mushroom supplements. Now, you sell tinctures or like, which are basically an extract, but in another form of extract, you sell powders, and then you also sell capsules. And maybe even sell like gummies or something like that. But they all are technically supplements, and you're not sure the exact intent. Like I would first think like supplement means like a powder or something like that, but that's just my own personal opinion. Mm-hmm. So it's still like you're getting granular, or it's like organic turkey tail supplements, but you could either be driving to, let's say, the product page of any one of those particular products, your organic turkey tail, capsule, tincture, powder, capsules, gummies, anything like that. Or you could be driving to, let's just say, like a collections page or your home page. So those are some of the common things that people just do, that just drive to like, okay, this is my best-selling product. We're just going to drive to that, or this is my collections page, but they're not always optimized to convert. And you could be leaving conversions on the table by not focusing on. I have a few tips, but I'm going to stop there. And Trent, I'm going to leave it to you to see, like, do you understand the context? Do you ever run into this scenario or anything like that?
So to summarize, basically you're saying, kind of on these like more broad keywords, they map potentially to these like subcategories of products, and it can be challenging to know where to take like a kind of a head term and direct it to, whether it be homepage, collection page, or like a specific PDP, because they kind of map to multiple things. Is that the challenge that you're describing?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
And yeah, commonly they'll either drive to just like their best product or collections page or their home page, because there is no perfect page. But what I'm saying is I have a few tips, and you might have a few tips as well when you run into this scenario that would maximize your growth potential and maximize the conversion rate.
All right. Yeah, let's jump into your tips.
Yeah. So one would be, yes, you could simply drive to collections page if it's optimized to convert. They're not always optimized to convert. And I see a lot of collections page, particularly not having where somebody will land on it and above the fold, they don't see exactly what they are looking for. So they they land on the page and they're like, I'm not in the right place. By collections page, I mean a page that houses all your products. So usually it's called like a collections page, all products page, whatever you call it. But it is a good place to start. And I think if you have filters on it, especially a better place to start. So in this dog bed scenario, you could just filter for if you have all your pet products, dog beds, large dog beds, and drive to that particular page. So that is one good place to start. But I think that you should be testing other ones. So the second one is to test and don't assume buyer's intent. The things that you could test is test for the page that has the highest conversion rate. But if you're, say, not a company that optimizes off CAC, then maybe use ROAS. So think about this in terms of average order volume. So when you have, say, your elevated dog bed or your cooling dog bed, and they're both for large dogs, think about, okay, which one are your best products and how are you defining this best product? So if you're a company that goes off of simply ROAS, return on ad spend, on the first purchase and not really concerned about customer acquisition cost, lifetime value, then you're going to want the product that has not only the highest conversion rate, but with respect to average order volume. Because if one product's average order volume that they purchase is, let's say, $50, but the other one's $150 and they have the same conversion rate, then which one are you going to want to go with? You're going to want to go with the one with the higher AOV. So I would take that into consideration when testing. And personally, I love Google Optimize to test it kind of on the back end. So you could split it in any way you want and just test. Like you have multiple different product pages, maybe put them head by head or test a particular product page versus your collections page. The third tip that I would have is something that I've actually been doing is having a little bit more faith in Google's algorithm. So let's say you're running, you're allowed to run up to 3 responsive search ads, RSAs. You can run the same ad 3 times with 3 different landing pages. So in the campaign settings, you should already, and it's on the default, have it for optimizing for best performing ad. And basically Google optimize your ads for clicks in each individual auction using signals for like keywords, search terms, devices, location, all these other signals. But in this particular case, where I've been really leaning towards in the last 6 months is letting Google optimize for what is the best experience. So in this particular scenario, and I might be having too much faith in Google's algorithm, but I truly swear by this since it's really been working in a lot of my accounts is, let's say with all the user behavior for a particular prospecting customer, they could tell somebody is maybe in the market for these elevated dog beds and another person's just in the market for these cooling dog beds. Could be the same thing, but pretend they're just totally different things. Then Google, instead of limiting yourself to say the perfect landing page, now Google will present the best landing page for that particular user. So that is just one thing that I have been using, and particularly in the mushroom supplement one, like organic turkey tail, which is a type of mushroom supplement. I might run this similar RSAs, but one has driving to the capsule page, one's driving to the powder, and one's driving to the tincture extract. So that is the third tip, is kind of let Google optimize for the best performing if you're not sure. And if one's underperforming, just as an aggregate, just pause it, try another page. And the fourth tip is create a unique marketing funnel. So in this particular scenario, you really want to connect with, maybe it's your e-commerce manager or your CRO person or your dev team, and work really closely with them to develop a new landing page to better curate the customer journey. I think customer journey is really underrated in paid search and particularly non-brand, because it can get really expensive. But if you're thinking about from the ad to the landing page to the retention, what we really have a control on in terms of conversion rate is the landing page. So some ideas that worked really well for particularly in the e-commerce space, the D2C space, is driving to say like a quiz funnel, like companies that do it really well, like Curology, Wisp, Proven Skin, a lot of these like beauty type products. But it doesn't have to be a quiz funnel. It could be, say, a better collections page with a better call to action. It could be a unique page with a headline that kind of matches the particular keyword and search terms that somebody's searching. So they land on it and they know they're in the right place. So I would really think about that in terms of like coming up with this unique marketing funnel. By that, I just mean really landing page. Yeah. And ultimately that will kind of help drive down your CAC, drive up your ROAS and increase your conversion rate. So those are my 4 tips. Trent, do you have any kind of questions, clarifications on any of those particular 4 tips?
Yeah. So I just wanted to summarize, make sure I got them all. I think they're
Sure.
all great. And I think I misunderstood the prompt, but we'll get into that on mine. So it sounds like one of the tips is to test, always be testing, specifically using Google Optimize or another platform, but just test your assumptions because you never know what the actual intent might be. Is that one?
Yeah.
Then the second one was just to use the Google algorithm to your advantage in specifically letting Google optimize in the ad optimize setting on, I think, the ad group level, for sure on the campaign level.
Yep.
And just letting Google decide, okay, you could throw 3 RSAs in there, let it figure out which one's the best one and go from there.
Yep.
And then the last one is around more of the whole customer journey and potentially drive into a quiz or testing. I feel like that one's like a sub bullet of the first one of like A/B testing landing pages. But just being creative in terms of what you're landing. If you think outside of what you have, if it's homepage collection, PDP, think of other things potentially like a quiz, or just doing your best collections. I feel like a lot of collections pages is just like not really optimized to like what the best sellers are, or what would have the highest click-through rates. It's kind of just like a bunch of products thrown up, when really there's like so much that can be done on the collections page itself to increase click-through rates and like improve CVRs down funnel. So just thinking like, what is that? If you are driving to a collections page potentially, what can you do on that page to actually improve those click-through rates and CVRs? So I think, wait, those are only 3. You said you had 4. Did I miss one?
No, you sum them up. I mean, in total, I think it could be summarized to basically test and really focus on your conversion rate. Like, don't really settle for a particular page that you may already have on the site, or just choosing a product because you're not sure. And I think it's more common than we think. And then as we probably brought up this topic, a lot of people will be like, oh, I do have this issue. And yeah, I just thought like, oh, I'm just going to do to my collection page, my homepage, or my best product. But in reality, there's just so much more that we could be doing. And like, as you mentioned, like when somebody drives to a collections page, there's so many things on the back end with the development team, how they could order those particular products to increase AOV, to increase conversion rates, and to really push particular products. And I think it's really important what we show above the fold. I think with really any landing page, but like when somebody is typing in that particular keyword and showing our ad for that particular search query and then landing on a landing page, like above the fold, instantly you want to let them know that they're in the right place. And that might be a particular headline. They see the product, the value props, whatever it is. I think to sum it up is like to test. I mean, you could let Google optimize and have faith in that. And if you don't have faith in that, then I would say use a tool like Google Optimize or something like that to help.
Yeah, no, I like those. So when I saw the prompt come on the topic list, I was thinking more of like, like on the feed, like if let's say you search for cooling bed or cooling dog bed as like your example, right? And you have like multiple things in your feed that like map to like that keyword, and you're potentially not ranking for like your top product by ROAS or by margin. what you could do on that like scenario is, which may not be a Google best practice in terms of breaking out smart shopping feeds, but you could break out your feed by margin or ROAS. I think this is something we've talked about in the past. That way you can bid and set budgets specifically to products based on their return or their margin, and kind of use like cooling bed, make sure most of the traffic goes to the feed items that you want. And then if there's other products potentially with lower AOV, lower margins, you can still have those in a separate feed, but with like a lower ROAS target potentially, or a lower budget, just to kind of optimize the spend in a way to drive traffic and the feed items that you want. You could also, of course, just like exclude items. Like if there's just items that aren't returning, that's kind of like a lot. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on when you launch smart shopping. And this is kind of going like off topic a bit, but how I launch smart shopping usually is like, it depends on how big the like catalog is, but let's just say I take like the top 25 best products and I throw it into like a feed, and I will launch that whole feed in smart shopping in one campaign. And then from there, I'll let it learn and then just exclude items that aren't converting. And that's kind of really like the main lever I use to optimize smart shopping, is just item exclusions. Is that something like, how do you optimize smart shopping? And I know everyone's like transitioning to performance max, which we could talk about, but just there's like so few levers in smart shopping. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. And I think too, with performance max, there's going to be just as many few levers. I mean, we're going to have a little bit more on the creative end, but yeah, for smart shopping, I'll start it the same way that you kind of started, like maybe a max conversion value, and I'll just launch it kind of one group, but in the product groups, I'll make sure I break it out so I can see the data on each particular product. My philosophy though is very like growth oriented, and I think I do the same philosophy for search that I do for shopping, where I personally don't like to exclude anything, if especially in shopping, but in search too, where it's like, if as a human understanding the business, that I believe that particular keyword or the search terms that it's populating for are relevant to the particular business, but they're just not efficient, then it's on me to make it efficient, with usually kind of back to the landing page experience and increasing conversion rate. So with shopping, it's like a similar aspect. As long as it's a hero product, like I'll exclude some products that are just not hero products. By hero products, just for context, I mean like your top products. A lot of times companies will kind of have products just for upsells and cross sells and things like that, accessory products, but your products are your main products. So how I would optimize is, usually trying to run on max conversion, open budgets, and then there's a few things. So as you mentioned, I think profit margin is like a big one. So there's an account that I'm running with over 1 million different SKUs, and it's 1 million different products and shopping. And one of the things that has been working really well is breaking their particular products by profit margin. So we'll have like 0 to 9%, 10 to 19%, 20 to 29%. And that helps us determine bids, because Google knows revenue, but Google doesn't understand profit margin. Mm-hmm. So that helps us control particular bids. The second thing that we could do is, like, most of the accounts usually have under 100 products. So kind of similar to what you're referencing is, you could exclude, but you could segment. So if you're particularly seeing like one main product getting like 90% of the budget and the other ones are not, there's a few things you can look at in terms of if there's still potential, I would say, in terms of the products, and there's the scaling opportunity. So what we can look at is impression share on any particular product. And I'm just bringing it up actually right now, like under like the competitive metrics, go back to campaigns, just taking a look. Search impression share. So like, for example, in this particular campaign, we're at about 48% impression share. And in that particular situation, it's like, okay, well, if there's a product that's really converting well, let's see if we can increase that impression share, maybe get it up to 60, 70, 80%. We'll see what those incremental conversions cost. And for the ones that are not, maybe keep them in a consolidated campaign, but take that main product and bring it into its own campaign. So you could really pay attention to reach and try to maximize that reach because you know the conversion rate's there, rather than like trying to increase budget and scale that whole campaign. And then you're increasing both the main product and the kind of the products that are not converting as well. The last thing I would say with smart shopping that I haven't used too much, but I have played around with it a little bit within accounts that were already using it, is the feed rules. So for example, in this particular account that I'm looking at right now, you can set a rule that says like, we know this product converts really well, so I want this product to show first. So like you set a basic condition that like populates, like when there's a feed and they all kind of would populate in that search query, you could say, I want set this as my top product in front. Haven't played around with it too much, but I think you could get pretty technical with it. But at the same time, I think if you set up your campaign structure right, then Google will ultimately do it unless you're in the long run, unless you're making too many changes.
That's interesting. So when you're looking at just going back to impression share and you're increasing that, are you looking at like the lost impression share by budget, or like what metrics are you looking, and like how are you actually increasing impression share on like those items?
Yeah. So for one example is I had in all products, just like you're talking about, and we noticed that two of the hero products were getting where we knew we were our best in terms of gross margin. We also knew that they were our best selling, and the data was showing that. So separating them out and giving them their own budgets, there was nothing that we really had to do to, let's say, increase impression share, but just by keeping open budgets and separating them out, what we found was that inherently allowed them to scale further because they were getting basically, they weren't having to divide that budget. So it wasn't something that was like, I'm going to do this and then I'm going to pull this lever. It was like, I'm going to test this, split it out, and kind of see what happens. If not, I'm just going to shut that campaign off and just launch it back in the old in the aggregated campaign. But I'm still running those campaigns today. It's like 8 months later. But I would say the one thing to be careful of is splitting out when you don't, like segmenting campaigns when you don't have enough volume. So we knew that particular product had enough volume, and taking that product out would not make the other products have too little volume.
Yeah.
So you just want to make sure each campaign has enough volume to leverage auto bidding. Otherwise, you're kind of, you're not going to.
What's your opinion? I think Google has a best practice for minimum conversions per month for automated bidding. I'd like to hear what you think the number is, because I think it's actually higher than what Google recommends.
Yeah, so Google recommends, I think they changed it like a year or two ago. I remember it on a deck. It was like 0 conversions for auto bidding. And that's just setting yourself up for failure and like ridiculously high CPCs. Yeah, I would say 50, and preferably 50 to 100. Like I won't per campaign.
Per month.
Yeah. And I would say 30 is like the minimum for like some of those smaller accounts, but I'm all for consolidation and aggregation. So yeah, let's say I know it's going to get 30, but preferably if I'm restructuring an account, like I make sure that there's historically enough volume in those particular keywords that we're going to get 50, if not more, conversions per month.
So I agree. I think like 100 ideally a month for it to actually have enough data points to properly optimize and hit the ROAS targets that you want. What is your recommendation for an account that isn't getting even, let's say, 30 conversions per month and have multiple campaigns, but the campaigns the keywords are not similar. So you may have some sort of conquesting strategy in a campaign specifically for that's targeting competitor keywords. Then you may have like a non-branded search strategy that's targeting more of your specific product categories that you're bidding for. So they're not very relevant, right? And in these two campaign silos, would you still consider consolidating them into one campaign, even though the keyword sets and kind of themes are so different?
Yeah. So I guess on a really drastic example would be like a brand, a non-brand, and like a competitor or conquesting, however you call it. Yeah, in that case, no. I would just kind of not make as many changes, consolidate where I can. And yeah, Google will still learn, but the recommendation of over 50 or really over 100 is so it learns quick. So you're not spending money and not sure kind of what's happening.
Yeah.
So I think the system still works, and this is where Google's recommendation comes in, but you just have to give it more time and try to remove as many restrictions as possible by kind of just leaving like all locations, all audiences, things like that, which I think are best practice anyway. But yeah, that would be my recommendation. I wouldn't consolidate. The only way I would consolidate is like in terms of, let's say, non-brand, like maybe you had two different types of products, and you're one of those types of campaign managers that has like 100 different campaigns, and it's a huge headache in that particular scenario. But like the campaigns are getting like 5 conversions a month or something like that, where it's under the 30 or under really the 50. I would have no problem in consolidating those campaigns into particular ad groups, and then having like personally, I run a lot of campaigns that might have 20 plus ad groups, and just for that consolidation in terms of auto bidding and to be able to leverage them as an aggregate. But in terms of like, as you're saying, when they're different areas of the funnel, then I would not, I would keep them separate just because they're going to have such drastic performance, like a competitor campaign versus a brand campaign. Just to consolidate doesn't make sense to put it in one campaign. But question, a lot of debate around it.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like Google. I feel like when we started, it was like the best accounts were so fragmented and like split out into like single keyword ad groups, and like if the most like granular you could get the keyword to add to LP, like, and you could use those levers and it improved account performance, and it was like so focused on quality score. Now it's so much more like trusting the algorithm and bucketing keywords and ad groups and using RSAs, which are like 15 different headline variants, 4 different description variants, and just saying like, all right, Google, go find the folks that convert well. So it's a different shift. I mean, I like it better now. I think managing accounts are easier now because you don't have to manage like thousands of ad groups.
Yeah.
But there are still some things that like in the older model were nice to have, and like kind of we'll talk about 80-20, but I actually wanted to pivot into the next topic of RSAs because I think this is like really tied to what we're talking about.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on RSAs? So we have that as a topic here. I have some thoughts on structure and on copy, but I'd like to just pass it to you and hear what you think.
RSA. So RSAs, for everyone that doesn't know, responsive search ads. You could have up to 15 headlines. You really only need 3, but you could have up to 15. I'd recommend having 15. And you could have up to 4 descriptions, headlines up to 30 characters each, and descriptions up to 90 characters each. Just need 2, but again, I'd recommend filling them all up. Also, Google is going to sunset in, I think, just a few months from now, ETAs. Yeah, June 30th, 2022. I have it in my notes right here. If you're running ETAs or expanded text ads, they're still going to be able to run. However, you're not going to be able to create new ones. As you already noticed in past years, it's been pretty hard to create new ones anyway. You kind of have to find the settings a little bit. It's not as easy. But yeah, so RSAs, I just want to provide like a few tips for anybody that's writing them. It could be a little bit overwhelming with like trying to fit up 15 headlines, thinking like, does it make sense to get populated in any order or anything like that? So first tip is to use all available headlines and descriptions, kind of what I already referenced, 15 headlines, 4 descriptions. This will really maximize the algorithm's ability to reach more conversions. Yeah, and ultimately it's going to increase your ad strength and your ad relevancy, which you can pull in as a column, your ad relevancy. If it doesn't say above average, you should work on it to getting it above average. And one way to do that is to maximize your headlines and descriptions and increase your quality score, which is ultimately going to help you have to bid less in auctions and also going to allow you to serve more. So one little like fine point in I think Google's help docs is that if you ad relevancy is low and you're not having the particular keywords in your headlines and your description and your RSAs, you're going to serve less. You're going to be showing up for less auctions and you're going to spend more to be able to show up for more auctions. So that's kind of quality score in a nutshell, but just maximize them. Think about some new. Okay, so 2 is to break up those 15 headlines into the following topics. So to simplify 15 headlines, because it could be a lot, I think about it in this particular structure. This is how I write it. I even color code it. I kind of put it in this breakdown. So 1 is like branded. You're going to want to have at least one headline that mentions like your brand name, your trademark name. So think about there's one headline right there. Now you only got 14 to go. The next one I do is keyword relevancy. So this just depends on how many keywords you have in your ad groups. But if you only have a few, this could be easy. If you have, let's say, greater than 10, it might get a little bit more difficult. But you usually, the whole 80-20 rule, which we'll discuss in a bit, there's usually like 1 or 2 of those keywords that drive a majority of your traffic. So my recommendation is to take 1 to maybe 4 of those headlines and have them with your keywords in them to increase your ad relevancy, your quality score. And with the tool, like the ad strength tool, when you're writing them, Google will even recommend like, hey, add this one and your ad strength is excellent. So that could be like for the dog bed example, it could be like cooling dog beds or like, like shop cooling dog beds, something like that. Just make sure your keywords in there. The second one, so now we're at like about like 10 more headlines to go. Value propositions. And I'll usually do about 2 to 5 headlines that are maybe like product specific or company related. And what that is like, so we'll go back to the dog bed example. Even though my dog, by the way, we don't have a dog bed, but we got a new couch not too long ago, and we had this futon in the living room, and we haven't like sold it or anything. And we haven't really wanted to get rid of it. So we just like moved it into our bedroom. So now our bedroom has like this giant like futon at the foot, and it's just become my dog's bed. So he just like sleeps on it on his back, and he's literally got a whole futon. So he lives like a king. But if you were searching for a dog bed, maybe in the future we'll be doing that, I would think about value propositions such as like supports dogs joints, or like delivers to your door, or like fast and free shipping, or sustainably sourced and or like designed just for your dog, like things like that. So I'll take like 2 to 5 headlines for that. The next one is trust. So this might also kind of cross over with the value props, but just for example, of some things I think about trust is like USDA organic certified, if you're a supplement company, or over 5,000 5-star customer reviews. Yeah, I would just think about like particular trust things, like are you third-party validated or something like that, or how many 5-star reviews do you have? Take a few headlines for that. Promotional. Well, this is going to take a little while just because there's 15 headlines, but this is just how I'm breaking it up. So I'll summarize it at the end, but promotional is kind of the next one. So if you run like an evergreen promotion, I would take at least 1 or 2 headlines and support that. So what I mean by that is like buy one, get one. If you run like a BOGO type deal, or money back guarantee, or I guess that would go more in trust, but like I said, there's a lot of crossover, or subscribe and save 20%. I see this a lot with like e-commerce companies, and they have like a subscription aspect to it. And usually you save like 20% or whatnot. So like subscribe and save 20%. Yeah, so just anything promotional, 1 or 2 headlines. The last one would be like a call to action. So again, the crossover, like shop cooling dog beds, that's a call to action. But if you didn't already have a call to action there, I would add in at least 1, if not like 2 or 3 call to actions. Like, what do you want people to do? Do you want people to check out now, like view your products? So just think about that and kind of weave those call to actions in. And that alone, like just thinking about those particular topics, which I'll just say right now, which is like a branded headline, a few keyword relevant headlines, get that quality score up, value prop headlines and trust headlines, maybe like 2 to 5 or so, promotional, and then your call to action. And that alone should get you 15 right there. So that is my tip number 2. Tip number 3 is don't use the same description for every responsive search ad. Like if you have like across your whole account and you're running the same descriptions just because you don't want to write new descriptions, I would say like really focus on that. Like some people do read it, and I think it's an opportunity to drive your quality score. So it could be as simple as like just switching out like a keyword that says like, instead of cooling dog bed, you say like elevated dog bed, because that's a particular keyword. So you don't have to make it super complicated, but I'd highly recommend that you just spend a little bit of time on not just thinking about your headlines, but also thinking about your descriptions, and make them a little bit relevant to the particular search term intent. The last one is around pinning. So Trent, I don't know if you use this, but there's a particular function where you're allowed to pin a particular headline to a position. So for example, if I always want to show like a money back guarantee in spot 2, I could pin it there. However, my recommendation around that is like, 1, like if you don't have to, there's no particular reason, don't pin, because you're only going to limit the amount of variations, and you're limiting Google's algorithm to optimize to the best performing for that particular user. But sometimes you have to pin. So like I was working for a brand and they needed to show their brand name in every single ad. And that was just like a policy. So it was either in position 1 or position 2. In that scenario, or if you really want to test pinning, my recommendation there would be to give at least a few variations to Google. So you could pin like 3 different headlines to position 1, and that still at least gives Google some variation. Yeah. And actually, I thought I only had, I have a couple more, Trent, but I'm going to stop there and ask if you have any particular comments before I just finish the last 3 tips that I have for responsive search ads.
No, I mean, I love them. I feel like I need to go back and review all my ad copy right now. I love the idea of, I think for me, you know, I'll just speak for my accounts. We have thrown headlines and descriptions in kind of ad hoc over time and trusted the algorithm to deliver the best results. And I agree on not pinning and letting the algo do that, but really breaking it out into these categories that you mentioned, I think is like super smart and something that, yeah, I definitely want to deploy in my accounts. It's great.
Yeah. And I would recommend it like for deploying, something that I'm sure that but like for listeners that don't pause old ads with historical data, like just add a new ad to the rotation. And then if the new ad starts to outperform the old ad, then pause it. But often, like ads, even if it's like you think it's better and it might be a better customer journey in terms of experience, just from that historical data, that the old ad is going to outperform, and you're going to significantly like dampen your account for depends on how many conversions you get, but it could be for a significant amount of time until that new ad ramps up. But
I think
the three
that
other, yeah,
just on that, I think that's key, especially when you're taking over a new account. I think when you take
yeah,
over a new account, you're so excited and eager to make changes and improve the performance. One of the things that sometimes goes into that, right, is cleaning up the account, pausing ads. I think you have to be very careful in that scenario, because even if an ad, like you said, is off brand, you don't think it resonates well, that historical data is like a cheat code with these things. Like, as long as the keyword has been running and the ad has been running, all that data built up, even if the ad doesn't seem like a good ad, you have to be really careful there. So I think that's a key nugget that you just dropped.
yeah. No, I think we should do another kind of episode or some tips on just like auditing or like taking on a new account, like you're a new manager or you're a new kind of um, you got a new agency or something like that, and things that you should do and the things that you should avoid. And something that you always used to say, Trent, is like it's what is it, like a cruise ship, not a speedboat or something. Yeah, don't rock the boat, basically. It's like when you get in there, it's like what are kind of low-hanging fruits that are not going to have any negative impact but only going to prove performance. And that might be just like adding a negative keyword or um, yeah, it's some like subtle changes, and then slowly rolling out the new changes. Because even if you think that the best in the world, it's like that historical data is ultimately going to outperform. So let me just go through these last three tips for RSAs. So tip number, I guess this would be 5: ensure your headlines and descriptions make sense individually and when combined. So this could be a little tricky, especially when you think of like you want to make sure that you have your keywords in at least like a few of your headlines. And what if you showed like cooling dog beds and like let's just say like large cooling dog beds, or like it's a bad example, but you get the point, where it's basically like if that was to show up in headline 1 and headline 2, it wouldn't make sense. But you have to have a little bit of faith in Google. But what I really mean by like make sense individually is don't write repetitive headlines. And this is something that Google recommends in their help docs. It's like saying like fast and free delivery, and then you have another one that says like um, free 2-day delivery. It's like you kind of already made that particular point across in your particular value prop. So like just write it one way and come up with a new one to speak to it. It's like not call now and call customer service now, like things like that. So like just think about it with common sense in terms of repetition, but don't worry about it too much in terms of keywords and kind of those keyword headlines. Just think about it in more of your value props and your call to actions. Like make them individual call to actions, make them individual value props that stand alone. Like one on reviews, one on free shipping, one on your guarantee, things like that. Don't write like 3 on different ways how to say like free delivery. Number 6 is optimize to the best performing ad. So this is something that we talked about just before, which was in terms of landing pages. So actually, correct that, not landing pages. This is optimize to the best performing ad. It should be a default on your campaign settings. So like don't optimize or rotate evenly. In terms of that, Google probably already like remove that in the future, but always keep that setting on. And Yeah, and have faith in that Google is going to optimize for that best user experience. The last one is, this is a big one actually, and I left it to the last, but like, don't ignore moderately restricted messages on your ads. Like, I think that's like a huge tip of like not writing RSAs, but like ads in general and like your account in general is like when you see that right next to your ad and it says moderately restricted, and that could be for like a bunch of reasons, but it basically means, to sum it up, is you're showing up for only a portion of the search queries that you could possibly be serving for. So you're limiting your volume, you're limiting your growth. So if it's a simple fix, and sometimes it is, like, just fix it, like appeal it, like fix whatever the issue is. But a lot of times it's not a simple fix. And so like a few tips that I would have is like, reach out if you have a Google rep and you're saying like, hey, this doesn't make sense, like have them push it to the policy team. And if you don't, then kind of like bug Google support until they give you an answer. Like just keep messaging them and eventually you'll get to the right person. If you truly believe that like, hey, your product's getting restricted because they think it's like a gun or a weapon or something, but in reality, it's just like a garage tool and it has the name gun because it does something related to that. As you can tell, I don't work on a lot of cars. So for that, but note, yeah, don't ignore it. There is in some situations, in some accounts, you just can't do anything about it, which is like if you run like, let's say like a DTC brand on like sexually explicit items, like Google just restricts that. Google restricts things like that. But for other ones, like let's say recreational drugs, like if you're truly running recreational drugs, then yeah, Google's going to restrict that and there's really nothing you can do to it. But let's say only some of your products are sexually explicit and some of them are not, then make sure that landing page, like it is not just your ad. Sometimes it's your landing page is what I found, like diving really deep with like Google policy team. It's like your ad might be totally clean and meet Google's policy, but because your landing page says something that says sexually explicit, that or has a product and like referencing like a link to that product, like you're going to want to make a landing page without linking to that other sexually explicit product if you want to get that product or that ad approved and not moderately restricted. I ran into that issue not too long ago for YouTube, and I had to change all my landing pages to not show one particular product, which Google thought was sexually explicit. But yeah, I would say that's a huge one. Like, that's totally going to restrict your volume. So those are my tips.
No, those are great. I feel like we should like write these out somehow in the notes. That way people can like quickly refer back to these. I'm going to for sure, because there's like this is like a checklist for RSAs, which is like fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I'll just kind of riff off of what you have because I don't have a full checklist like that. Mine is specific to the copy and it speaks to a sub bullet of yours on value props. So Nick Sharma, you may or may not know him, runs Sharma Brands. He's like, quote unquote, the D2C guy. Yeah. He has said in previous podcasts that really your marketing copy lives in your customer reviews and in your customer text messages and Slack channels. So I think one overlooked item that I had done in running accounts was looking at the website, figuring out like what the value props are, and then throwing the value props into the headlines. And then kind of being like, okay, that's ad copy and we'll let it test. And then later we'll maybe like throw some promos in or whatever. I definitely have not taken the structured approach, how you break it out. And I love that. But additionally, the customer review piece. And this is something that I think is a manual process, right? Like downloading the customer review feed, whatever you're using, and just going through and just reading all the reviews. I think that is the closest you can get to your customers and what they think about your product and the benefit they actually get, right? You may be advertising one thing, but customers may be actually buying your product for a different reason. Using that research, bring that up to the copy level, has proven to work well. We've done some A/B tests on landing pages specifically, calling out like, instead of saying whatever their value prop is for the brand, and like being feature driven, like it does all these cool things, just hitting the main pain point right in the headline, in the hero of the LP, and that improved conversion rate, which is like, so like duh. But unless you're doing like that kind of manual hard research of customer reviews, you may not know like what the true pain point is. For like dog bags, right? It could be like, no more restless nights caring for your dog or something, right? Instead of like, this is the most comfortable bed for your dog. It's like every bed is going to say that, but what are you actually solving for?
That in the landing page now, or are you saying also the particular headline or description?
Both.
RSA. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a
Both.
little tricky. Like, how are you fitting it? I guess my like playing devil's advocate is like, are you using an actual quote, or are you saying something like see what customers are saying or something like that to like fit it in within the character count?
So what I have done is take like 100 of your most recent reviews, read them, and next to each review, like in an Excel sheet or in a Google sheet, try to figure out like what the theme is of the review. And you'll start to like notice a trend. Like when I used to work at like Dun and Bradstreet, a lot of the calls were about how do I get my DUNS number? And these themes like start to stack up, and you're like, okay, these calls, that's another, instead of reviews, you could also listen to customer calls and like incoming support tickets. But just like take like a subsection of your reviews and then start to theme them out. And then you could like pivot on the theme and be like, okay, what is the top theme of these? And then from there, you look at those and say like, oh, the pain point is they need their DUNS number or whatever it is. And then you can like write in a headline. So not necessarily taking like a specific quote. You could do that. That's an interesting idea. But really just like finding the theme that is in the reviews that is like commonly used and just addressing that, like bring that right to the front for folks.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think that's a really good one. I mean, I'm like thinking like I have a sheet with some of the best customer reviews. We use it in social a lot. But in particular, ad copy, that is not something that I've used just because of limits and character count. But I think as you mentioned, you could get themed. I work on a lot of health brands, and it's a little bit tricky with claims, which you have to kind of write to be approved by legal, because not everything is, you can't just say like, hey, this is going to make you live forever or anything like that. But I think with customer reviews, it's not you, it's the quote. And I think with the theme and saying that, hey, these are what customers are saying, like that kind of gets you away from it a little bit. And I would be really interested to try it. Specifically where I'm thinking is like, what I found is a little bit tricky on a lot of accounts that could possibly be good is like, so you have a lot of, let's say your brand, or what I consider like a semi-brand for particular products, have names, like a branded keyword, is like branded keyword plus review. So you'll find that either you're already bidding on that as a search term, or it's coming up as a close match variant or a phrase match for a phrase match keyword. And those keywords generally have significantly lower conversion rates and perform slightly more like a non-brand, because I think people are not really looking for like your biased feedback, but like at the same time they are. Like I've seen a few brands, and I've been trying to work with the development team to particularly have an experience. By that I mean really like a landing page for those keywords. Like if 400 people a month, let's just say, are searching for your brand plus review, and you're just driving them to a product page or to your home page or to your About You page, it's like, are you really doing it justice? Like that's probably why the conversion rates stink. But like if you're doing what you're saying, like that could be huge, because like it just you're just overwhelmed by social proof, and that could make it perform more like a brand keyword rather than like a non-brand. So
yeah, and also you should look at your brand plus review and look at the auction reports and just do anecdotal feedback. Sometimes competitors won't bid on your brand directly, but they will be bidding on your brand plus review and sliding in there and being like, actually, our product is better, which is actually an interesting spot to run a conquesting campaign, is
Sure.
because, like you said, those CVRs are lower. People are more in the research phase still. They may not be ready to buy. If a brand slides in and steals your traffic and says, they could do a whole comparison page in a comparison chart that shows why their product is better. Like, that could be stealing a good chunk of your traffic. And if you're not looking at the competitive insights or just doing searches just on Google yourself, you could be missing that. So
Sure.
something to
Yeah.
look at.
Yeah. For everybody listening, Trent's like the conquesting king. Like, you said, that's like your best campaign, right? Like, no one else gets it to work. And like, I mean, I run them, but yeah, generally they're less efficient. What I've also found is that, as you're mentioning, so reviews, I haven't done too much with breaking it out there. I have broken it out, but like, yeah, I think what I've found is like breaking out by anybody looking for like a promo or a discount or some type of like a monetary discount. So that basically the intent is that you're shopping around. So if it's like competitor plus promo or competitor plus discount code or something like that, like they're not convinced that like they're open to like the cheapest product, or they're open to like a product with better value prop. So I found those perform a lot better if you put some type of like competitive value prop in there. But like the reviews one's big. I think I'm going to definitely explore that. So I think that's a good tip. Do you have any other tips on particularly RSAs, or do you want to jump into the next particular?
No, I think you really crushed that. Let's jump into the next one, the 80-20 rule. So you put this in the docket. Love to hear a little bit of context. That way we can level set for folks and for me.
Sure.
I have some thoughts on it, but I'd love to hear kind of what you're thinking there and then what's your strategy.
Yeah. So I've been thinking more about the 80-20 rule because somebody sent me this book. It's an old book. It's called 80-20 Sales and Marketing, the definitive guide to working less and making more, by Perry Marshall. I think it was made in like 2013, but the principles pretty much stay the same. And I think it can be summed up like it could have been summed up very quick. So basically the 80-20 rule, or the what is it? The Pareto, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, principle, states that roughly 80% of the effect comes from 20% of the cases. What we mean in context of like growth marketing, and specifically our specialty paid search, is like 80% of your sales come from 20% of your marketing. And so like 80% of your Google and ads performance comes from about 20% of your account. And I think that's big. Like whenever you're onto a new account, or whenever you're auditing, or whenever you're thinking like, what can I possibly do to improve my account? So what it could be is like, there's probably like a handful of keywords, like when you're just looking at your search campaigns, that are driving like majority of your performance, probably about 20%, driving 80% of your performance. And I think it's a really good mindset to have, particularly like this 80-20 principle, because like a lot of times, especially in large accounts, it could be overwhelming. And like when you just take a step back and you realize that like, okay, like I could be doing all these things to try to improve performance, run these tests, but what's going to make the biggest difference? And it's that 20% of the account that's driving 80% of your performance. And like, take a look at your accounts now, everyone listening, and like, it could be paid search, it could be social, it could be anything, any kind of growth channel. And you'll realize that like this 80-20 principle particularly lies, maybe it's 90-10, maybe it's 60-40, whatever it is, there's a portion of the account that drives majority of the performance. So so I would say that by performance, like when I think of like, okay, taking a step back, it's like, how do you look at like what is actually driving performance? And the ways that I think about it in segmenting, and you could look at also when you're pulling data and insights for like audits and new accounts, and just like kind of see where there's areas of improvements, is like start off with, okay, campaign type. All right, you got your search campaigns, shopping, maybe soon to be Performance Max, maybe your YouTube, discovery, display. Split it out like that. See which ones are driving majority of the performance, focusing on that. Another one is like specific campaigns, like which specific campaigns are driving majority of your traffic. Outside, maybe exclude brands, but like you have like maybe 4 or 5 non-brand campaigns, maybe you have like 100. Like which ones are driving particularly majority of the performance. So you go campaign type, and you go campaigns, then you look at ad groups. Okay, you're in an ad group. You're in a campaign, and you see like, okay, well, these 2 ad groups out of these 10 are driving majority of the performance. And then the next one I look at is like keywords and search terms. And again, it's like you're running on 300 search terms, and you see that it's like 60 keywords are, you're running 300 keywords, and like 60 keywords are driving majority of the performance. Then you break that down even further, and you realize it's like 5 that are driving like majority of your performance, what I usually find. So the next thing I wanted to say was like, now you're going to know where to focus your landing page test, your bid adjustments. Maybe you go more granular into your search query reports, because like you have a super large account and you're just trying to see like not every little search query, like everywhere you spent money every single day. It's like, well, let's just focus on like that area that's driving, that's taking up majority, driving majority of your performance. And if you just excluded that one particular search term or that few search terms, like you could drastically improve your performance because it's also majority of your spend. I think that this structure really applies to everything. But I think like for particularly, and I'm going to skip I had some stuff in my notes, but I was going to stop with this. And like, Trent, like, what is your take on this? And I have a few more notes, but like, I'll hand it off to you in terms of like, do you take this principle into account when managing, like taking a step back and looking like, okay, like I could do a million things, like what's going to have the biggest impact if I just focused on this?
Yeah. No, it's on my best days, this is at like the front of my mind. It's 80-20. On my worst days, I'm optimizing on things that don't matter, and it's low spend. So it's a great framework to come into each day with. I early on kind of learned this principle just from like taking on accounts, and I was like taught just to sort campaign spend and find like what the top converters are, because most of the spend was like around like these one set of keywords.
Sure.
And how I framed it back then was, if I can only do one thing today, what would make the company the most money? Which is kind of a different route to thinking 80-20. Like, let me make sure I'm focusing my efforts on the most impactful things. So I took a little bit of a different route to it, which is just like, time is limited. Where's like my focus the most impactful? And that really helped me. But every day is like a challenge, right? Because there's things that come up, either yourself, you want to go and like optimize maybe these like things on the edges that are big time. They demand a lot of time. And also you get pulled into things with different teams, and sometimes it may not be the most impactful thing. So it's hard. But yeah, I try to live by this, because it is true. The accounts, they aggregate at the top on like a select few things. And if you could focus your efforts there, then you can improve the account usually.
It's a good mantra to have. Yeah. It's like, 80-20, or however you think about it. It's like, how are you going to make the company or your company like the most money today? Like what is that decision? It's like, is it focusing on like that really small granular area? And sometimes it is. Sometimes it's like, I did everything I can. I just need to give it more time to get the significant data to make decisions on like the major part of the account. And now you have the extra time to like allocate it to like, don't totally ignore the other areas of your accounts, because like, what's the point of running it? But I think when you're strapped for time, it's like, think of that particular principle. So one thing I wanted to say was that a couple things to watch out for in these particular principles. And one would be like when you're working with an agency. So myself and a lot of you guys listening might not be running your own accounts, and you might be guiding an agency or a consultant, or eventually handing the account off to somebody else. And I think like a key principle that you see with a lot of agencies is that they apply this 80-20 rule to different UIs or different platforms. So for example, like if you have an agency running your Google and your Bing ads, maybe some other ads, and Google is majority of the spend, usually about 5x. That principle, they'll apply to like Google and Bing, and they'll kind of just let Bing ride out and ignore it. I think one thing to watch out for is like putting the pressure on them, or maybe it's yourself, to like not be lazy in that sense and neglect a particular platform. So like in my stance on that is like, yes, the 80-20 rule applies. Like Google is driving majority of the performance, but at the same time, like unless you're paying attention to it, and it requires a lot less attention, then don't run it. Like, for example, what I see a lot of brands, they'll run like, okay, I'm going to run Pinterest, I'm going to Reddit, I'm going to run query ads. And then like, they're only getting like 5%, 5,000 per month in media spend, and like everything else is getting like hundreds of thousands. And they'll just like ignore it. Like they just don't have time for it. It's like, what's the point of running it? It's like not that efficient. And if they just focused a little bit of time on it, they can maybe make it efficient and kind of get it in the mix. And then it might not need as much time because it's lower spend and it's eventually, but like that would be like my one watch out. So like treat each engine, in this case, like Google and Bing, separately, and then apply that 80-20 rule within those engines. Yeah. And otherwise it's never really going to get that kind of that attention it needs just to really thrive. And you shouldn't be running it, in my personal opinion. And then also like, again, like taking a step back out of just the paid search world is like, consider like multi-touch attribution if you're using any particular tools. One tool that I use is Rockerbox. And when it comes to the 80-20 rule and measuring performance, for example, it looks easy to look at your campaigns and see that your, let's say, let's say one particular channel has, is super efficient. Like your paid search bot on the funnel is super efficient. And you're not considering like, let's say like a lot of these multi-touch platforms are click-based conversions, like Rockerbox. So you're not considering like these view through conversions. And let's say, for example, like you shut off your YouTube ads, or you shut off your TV ads, your radio ads, your podcast ads, because on a direct response basis, they look like extremely inefficient. Not realizing that these have this incremental kind of trickle down effect, and what is funding a lot of the search volume to your within your search campaigns that are looking really efficient. So if you were to say 80-20 rule, okay, we need to cut spend, like let's just cut all this upper funnel media and just focus on down funnel media, like search and retargeting campaigns. What's going to happen in that case, when you're not seeing kind of the big picture, is that you're going to significantly decrease your volume and most likely efficiency. So like that would be one thing, or the second thing to watch out with like this kind of 80-20 rule is like, keep this in mind when making decisions, that that there's this multi-touch aspect, and yeah, to kind of think about this trickle down effect of your sales funnel, your media funnel.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. You have to really think about the full funnel before you just go and cut things.
Sure. Yeah. And there's ways to test like incrementality, because like I'm not always convinced. Like agencies might tell you like, oh yeah, spend 100,000 a month in YouTube. Like that's how you get to work on a direct response basis. Then it doesn't work on a direct response basis. And you're like, well, it's providing this like this lift and in search and like brand, like we can see like a little bit of a lift, but it's not really that significant. It could just be like overall like market fluctuations. And you could tell within the engines, like going on like the tools and settings, and then going into kind of the attribution and looking at the path to conversions. And you could see like, oh, that YouTube went to that, like somebody saw a YouTube video or clicked on a YouTube ad and then converted onto, let's say, a branded search. But what I'm always in favor of is like a match market test. I don't know how much you ran those in the past, Trent, but like I'm actually just about to launch a new one, and I'm really curious to see how like YouTube and display works in relation to Google search. And is it worth it? Is it worth that like 85, 100K a month, or are we just wasting money? And it's like I would rather kind of just do the test, give it a couple months. And if it works, great, we keep running it and we scale it. And if it doesn't, then cut it. Put that money somewhere else, test somewhere else. So that's my opinion on the 80-20 rule. But I think overall, yeah, your mantra is kind of, to sum it up, like, how can you make the company money? What are like the 1-2 levers that you could do?
Yeah. I mean, it's defensible too. Like if your boss is like, hey, you only did this one thing today. You say, I thought this would be make the most money. Like, you're like, all
Yeah,
right, at least you're like, you're
that is
trying.
true. Yeah, that's a good way to get out. It's like, yep, nope,
There's
just
so
did
much to
this.
do. Like the list of things to do is never ending, right?
Yeah,
Optimize copy, run A/B test,
sure.
dig into the data, pick up trend. Just like it's never ending. So I think having some frameworks to fall back on, which is this 80-20 principle, is like super helpful.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think just the reminder, everyone knows about it, but I think just the reminder of like actionable steps that they could be able to take as growth marketers.
So I threw this in here. I saw you had this like on the idea list, and it's like a pain point. It's like every quarter, the Google reps, depending on your account size, like shifts. So if you have like a big account, it may not shift as often. Like it may not shift on a quarterly basis, but they do shift probably within a cadence. Like I haven't had a Google rep for more than a year in a long time. But you have like these kind of two tiers, at least the accounts I manage right now are broken up into these tiers and based on spend. And the higher you spend, typically the higher quality of the rep you get. And for the main tier, I actually have different takes for like high spending tiers and low spending tiers. In terms of like a small account, you kind of get these reps that are not as experienced and they are reading off a script of like the latest things that Google has released. And they make recommendations, in my opinion, that aren't always helpful to the account performance. And they don't have context because they've just gotten the account for like the last week, right? And then they're trying to recommend to you these changes in your account that usually, in my experience, have hurt performance. So anyone that, if you're in this tier, which is every quarter you're getting new reps, I would be taking the advice with caution. And I think most managers know this, but if you're a new manager or you're a new freelancer, you're just starting off, like I would not change anything on the call if you can help it. I would always double check and do your own research off call and then implement some recommendations. I do think that they're on these calls, typically 10 or 15% of the info on the call actually might be helpful to you. They actually might show you something in the ads platform that you didn't realize was there, or it's like a new feature, and in your day-to-day work, you just haven't found it yet. So I do think they offer value, but I would be careful making any actions without doing your own research. So that's kind of like the base level tier. In terms of like kind of like the pro level tier where you're spending a good amount of money, usually these reps have more experience. They have been with the brand a bit longer. They have more support. I would say this is just a better place to be. And I would use them as partners, right? So a lot of times you may be the only one in the account on a day-to-day basis. I would recommend using your Google rep as a second pair of eyes. Look at them as a team. I have been on teams before where there's a team that potentially was burned by their Google reps, and then it turns into like this us versus them mentality, which I think happens, like I mentioned, on like that lower tier spend reps that are not as experienced, they're just reading off of a script. I think you have to be very cautious with them. But I try to use in the pro quote unquote tier, like really use them as partners and have them pull data for you. They have data teams behind them, have them pull data for you, get trends, make sure that you're all ready to go for your peak seasons, get in betas. They can get you into betas for testing. And if there's anything that comes up, sometimes you mentioned earlier on the call, ads get disapproved. You may need some landing page insights, like use them as an extension of your marketing team. And I think it can work well. I would also caution on anything they recommend, because their incentive is to get us to spend more, but usually they understand the best way to do that is to make us grow profitably. So I try to kind of keep this relationship with the reps that are on kind of that higher level of spend, like fluid, and I use them a lot. Like I bring them in and I lean on them a lot, just so that they also are like in the business with me. And I would just be cautious of those lower tier reps and that might be mean to say, but just that may have lower experience when you've already been on an account for like more than a year. So
Sure. And plus, when you have higher tier, higher spend, and what I mean by higher spend, I'd probably say like 500,000 a month and up, maybe. But I've worked on accounts that have like enterprise level, which is like a few million or more a month, and they have teams. Like they'll have usually one head rep. They'll have somebody on maybe analytics. They'll have a team of at least 3, if not more, for these really large accounts, and they are invested. Like you said, they're partners. So, and they want you to be successful because like the whole 80-20 thing. I mean, like you're in there 20%, driving 80% of the Google revenue. So they really want you to be successful, because successful means you're going to be able to spend more. And I think like in general, all Google reps want that. But I think you hit a lot of the points on the nail. It's like they are incentivized to, one, have you spend more, and 2 is to roll out and test and get people more more involved and to adopt the latest products. For example, Performance Max. Like they want you to adopt it. They want to test it. They want to get as many people involved as or as many accounts involved as possible. Yeah, and it's kind of funny because like I presented, or somebody presented, I forgot. Somehow it came up in a Slack group, and there was a bunch of like campaign managers, and they were like talking about Google reps, and like it had like literally the most like threads, like comments on it out of like anything that was on this like Slack group in this Google Ads channel. And yeah, some of the things that people were saying, they were just like not a fan. Like I definitely lean on the side of you, where it's like you have to be your business. You're the only advocate for your business. Like Google is not an advocate for the business. Like they don't understand it the way that you do. And maybe at the higher levels, they do a little bit because they've been around it longer. But like, but yeah, Google doesn't really understand it as much as you do. But like these managers were like bashing it. It was kind of funny. And I think like, yeah, they might be right, but I don't know, from your experience and my experience, I think we worked across so many different accounts and different sized accounts that like we have a more well-rounded outlook on it. But like I would say my pros is like there's definitely a pro to having a Google manager where it's like expediting policy issues. Like I always run into policy issues just with the nature of the accounts that I run in and like the health space. And it is a huge help to have somebody on the inside like pushing the policy team or jumping in a meeting with the policy team to get things approved. I think like if you're a sole manager and you're managing an account all by yourself, like having somebody just like a second eyes to QA some of the data, like some of your accounts. And so like you said, like there's some features that you just may not have come across. You might not even have thought about. And like that little bit of recommendation, like take it or leave it, but like it could help. So as long as you're an advocate for your business, I think helping again, like the policy issues, like to schedule and fix issues like across other Google products, like with the kind of the shopping team, like the Google Merchant Center. Like if you're having an issue there, like you're able to kind of work with that team and they're kind of expedite that, setting up that meeting, or like GTM, and like they'll expedite to make sure your conversions are all tracked and get on the team with them. And it's usually good for the most part to have that second set of eyes and that resource. And it's for free, technically. I mean, technically you're paying for it in the media spend, but in terms of the help, it's I always accept it in terms of that. So other things is like launching betas, presenting industry trends, like you said, and overall just another set of eyeballs. The cons, I would say, is like the incentivize to spend more and to adopt products that may or may not be proven yet. So what we find a lot is like, and this was like kind of where they were like in that particular group, and I have another like article that they were like talking about stuff like this too, where it's the SE Roundtable. It's a really good blog and resources for anybody that's interested in kind of SEM marketing. But this one, it was titled like 70% of search marketers say Google ads cost per clicks are going up. And this was launched in February 23rd, 2022. And the funny thing is like the second comment on it was like, unfortunately, this is only getting worse, especially with Performance Max. The problem is that Google wants a substantial year-on-year revenue increase, but there is only a finite amount of online transactions. Remember, Google doesn't create sales; it just effectively allocates them to different merchants. Everyone is fighting for the same customers, so Google can only achieve increased revenue by taking more from each merchant. And Google achieves this by introducing a new automated bidding feature every few years, example, enhanced bidding, smart shopping, now Performance Max. The early adopters of each see good but short-term superficial ROAS increase with increased CPCs because they are stealing sales from the merchants not yet on the latest auto bidding. Google then uses these superficial ROAS statistics and incentivize or send, I can't even speak today, has incentive for its reps to convince all merchants to move to these latest auto bidding. But as soon as most merchants have moved to it, they're all achieving the same sales they were before, as everything is shared out equally once again, just at a higher CPC. But then the cycle repeats. Google comes up with a new automated bidding feature. It allows them to push up CPCs. I think like that's the story with all digital media.
Yeah.
It's getting more expensive, but I thought it was a really interesting perspective how he put it. And
have you read Andrew Chen's blog post, The Law of Shitty Click-Throughs?
No, I have not.
Okay, I'll send this to you. This is a great article. It is kind of like, I think CPCs go up over time, and that's Andrew Chen's point. And he has this whole article on this, like just more people get into these auctions. Like a banner ad when they first launched had like a 78% click-through rate. Now a banner ad has like a less than 1% click-through rate. Like it's like 0.001 actually. It's like crazy. And the same thing has happened with email. Email open rates used to be like 70, 80%. Now they're down in like 20, 30%. So over time, all marketing channels degrade. And he makes an argument that a way to counter that is to get into like these new products. Like say Facebook lately has been post iOS 14 really struggling, but TikTok has been emerging, right? So you get this like CPC arbitrage where some platforms decline, but then you can go and you can jump into TikTok where CPCs are super cheap right now because people aren't there. I think that also is like what happens with these Google products. Like it makes complete sense. Like people that hop on Performance Max first are going to get the best CPCs and the best ROAS. And it's an interesting point because they do flaunt like people that adopt this have 60% higher ROAS. And it's like, how much is that?
Enhanced conversions, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. How much is that? Is a product getting better? Some percentage, I assume, as just the algorithms get smarter, the products get better. But how much of it actually is just a CPC arbitrage opportunity where they just have unlocked more inventory and you're just kind of getting in early, right? It's interesting.
It's the name of the game, though. That's why we got to work smarter and just be an advocate for your business. I think like that's the biggest thing. Like know your profit margins, know what levers you need for your business. Like don't give it all to Google. Don't run one massive campaign and just be like, oh, you know what, it's consolidation and call it a day and not have any levers that make sense to your particular business. But you know what I think one other big question is that I hear a lot with around Google reps is like, how do I get one? Like with a lot of these small accounts that are looking to grow. So I just wrote down like a couple tips and pretty simple, but it's like, you're always going to hear, like if you reach out to Google support, that they're automatically assigned by the system. And maybe they are, but I think it's a bunch of BS. And personally, I think like once you have a Google rep, or if you had a few Google reps in the past, like make sure that you keep their contact information, either email or a friend of mine on LinkedIn, and reach out to them. If you have a new account, you're a manager, you're a new brand, you just launched, and you're like, yeah, I'm looking to grow. And make sure you say you're looking to grow, because that's what they want to hear. They want to hear that they can help you spend more. Yeah, reach out to them. Like just kind of send them an email, send them a few emails or LinkedIn DM or something like that, and you'll be able to get it. But yeah, just be an advocate for your brand. I think that sums it up.
Yeah, great. Couldn't agree more. Okay, do we want to hop into the last topic?
Yeah, this was your topic. Take it away. I had a few points, but
all right. So I don't know if you noticed the theme with these topics that I'm adding is just like top of mind for me this week, and I just want to hear your feedback. So I'm using this as like a way to pick your brain. So what, and I guess I'll open it considering it's my topic. It's like sometimes I have campaigns that are on TROAS, automated bidding strategy, and the budget, let's just use a round number, is 1,000, and it's only spending half of that each day, 500. So, and it's efficient, like it's meeting the ROAS target, and we want to scale it. What are, in your opinion, levers to scale specifically search campaigns in this example when the ROAS is being met and the budget isn't being hit? So you're trying to unlock more opportunity. I think the first thing that comes to mind is always drop your ROAS target to unlock more volume. I think that's the thing that Google would recommend as you just get into more expensive auctions and you unlock more volume. That does seem to work, but I think there are more intentional and profitable ways to unlock more volume. And I'm kind of going through this process in my accounts right now where this is potentially happening on these campaigns. And I'll just go through them really quickly. I think just going back to keyword research is one way. So look at your keyword set. I use Keyword Planner and I use SEMrush. There are others out there that you can use. They do similar tools, do similar things, but find keywords that you currently aren't bidding on that are relevant to the campaign and products you're advertising for and get up on those. I think just expanding your keyword set is one way. Outside of changing your ROAS target, it's one way to unlock more volume. I would say now that we have ROAS as a guardrail to these campaigns, opening up, and this is kind of like a subset of keyword expansion, potentially opening up match types. I think if you're running a heavy exact or phrase match setup, you may want to experiment with broad. Have to be careful because broad can really spin to the moon. The ROAS targets theoretically should keep you in line over a 30-day period. But I have noticed when I tested broad that within the first 7 to 14 days, the ROAS targets are missed. They typically figure it out over time, but you do run the risk of being inefficient for a short period. But that is one other way that you can unlock more volume. Obviously, is just opening up your match types. So add keywords, open up match types. The last thing I have is really on audiences. You may get to a point where you're excluding certain customer lists, or you're excluding genders or ages or income demographics in your audience section of your campaign settings. And a quick way to potentially get more volume is just to open up those audiences. Let the algorithm find the ROAS that you want and open up the exclusion list. So those are my three. Sure. I'd love to hear if you have any others to think about to scale campaigns when the budget isn't being met.
I think those are great. So I think one big thing that you mentioned is like a lot of this plays into effect of like giving Google enough conversions, like our conversation around that. So like, for example, if you're with the audience segments, like if you might be excluding, or no, sorry, with the broad. So like you're opening it up to broad and you're like, it's just not hitting my TROS goals, but maybe it's just there's not enough conversion volume in the initial. And then once you kind of get enough conversion volume, it will kind of normalize. But what you're basically saying is you're running open budgets. You're have a budget, you're not hitting your budget. You have your TROS goal, you're hitting your TROS goal, and you're humming along there, but you're like, okay, like how do we scale this thing? Because that's ultimately ideas to grow your top line. So I think a lot of the ideas that you said, I agree with. One particular one is like, yes, I totally agree with kind of keyword expansion, thinking about like the whole marketing funnel. So you might be saying like, back to our always example, like these dog beds, but you might have searches that you've excluded and like taking a look at your negative list. And it might be like benefits of a cooling dog bed, or like thinking about like the marketing funnel, like dog beds, cooling dog beds, or like buy cooling dog beds or something like that, or cooling dog beds for sale. That's like really low in the marketing funnel. Like benefits of, or like if you're a supplement company and you're looking for like let's just say like what does GMO, like what does, let me think, like MGMO, like for honey, like it's a type of honey, work with a company like Manuka Honey, and it's like, what does MGMO stand for? Or like or MGMO versus another type of particular, I'm drawing a blank here, but basically what I'm saying is that thinking about the marketing funnel, thinking about your particular keywords, and ultimately deciding like, I'm running on very high intent keywords. Can I make another campaign that's more low intent? Like breaking out, getting those benefits keywords,
Yeah.
getting keywords around like more higher up in the funnel type of keywords. And just for an example, I'm pulling it up right now, which would be of like lower intent campaigns. And I like to break out, honestly, my campaigns, if I have enough volume, by like low intent and high intent, because these low intent keywords are not always going to be as efficient as your high intent. I mean, probably almost definitely not going to be as efficient. But if you break them out into a different campaign, this is one reason to break out your campaigns, is to control the budget. So like you're saying like, hey, my blended performance, my blended ROAS in your case is like 1.5 or 2x or whatnot. I need to keep that. Like that's my KPI. That's what I'm getting measured off of. But I want to also expand. What if I took a few $100s a month out of your budget, it's just a few percent, 5%, 10% or something, and just tested this testing budget in these campaigns of these lower intent, higher up in the funnel keywords, such as like benefits, or like what is, or like how to choose, or like blank versus blank, like in this case, Manuka honey versus raw honey, or like, is it good for you, or like honey for immunity or something like that. Like these keywords that are less purchase driven, like somebody's ready to convert right there. And I think that's a really good place to start expanding. But like taking a step back is like the first question I would ask in that particular scenario that you're running me through is like, what is your impression share? But impression share doesn't always tell the full story. Like there's two performance metrics that I used for a while, but I've really been using recently and pulling them in. So like when you're looking at like your columns and columns to add, you under the performance section, there's impression absolute top percent, and then impression top percent. So impression share just shows like the amount of times you're showing up that you could have been showing up, and maybe it's like 80% or something. What impression absolute top percent is like another, that basically replaced your position. Like if you're running kind of Google ads, Bing ads for a while, you used to have the position metric. This basically tells you like what percentage of the time are you in first position. And then impression top percent is like the same thing, but it's just like what percent of the time are you showing up in that first, that maybe not spot one, but it could be like spot 1, 2, or 3. And those are really key metrics because like when you're thinking about expansion, usually you're thinking about growth in terms of like conversions. You're thinking like, what if like those metrics tell you like, I have room under my current keyword settings to scale. And to do so, yes, you might have to lower bids, but that will tell you like, is there truly room to grow? Like maybe if I just increase my impression top percent just a little bit, that will ultimately increase my conversion rates. And I would just say one caution with that is just measure what those incremental conversions cost to do. If you spent an extra $200 per day to get like 2 conversions, but your normal CPA is like $50, like that CPA, that incremental CPA for those 2 conversions is like $100. So like think about it like that, but use those 2 metrics. The next one is agree, you're keeping open budgets. I think that just allows for market fluctuations and gives signals to Google that's saying like, hey, like we want to scale. And I've always found that like don't let budget be a bottleneck for you. Let bid, like always let your campaigns be controlled by bid, not budget. Keyword expansion. Yeah, I would say also outside of like your match type example, like if you're only running exact match, you're significantly limiting yourself to, if you're not running phrase match and broad match, to grow. And you could always add negatives in. You could always restrict on bids and budgets in terms of like what you want your testing budget to work to make sure your blended performance is there. But another one is like dynamic search ads. Like if you're not running dynamic search ads, they could be like a great way, just like broad, as a keyword harvesting tool, as I call them. So like, let's say you have like, you're hitting your blended performance, you have a portion of your budget for broad. And like, I also wouldn't discount broad match. Like I have certain particular accounts that broad is outperforming exact match. And it's just the nature of the industry. Like what you'll find if you run across many different industries is like Google understands some industries better than other industries. Some industries like Google has no idea what you're talking about when you put in like mushroom supplements or something. I think it's a drug and they have no idea what the close match variants are. And then you have another one like around like honey, like a specific type of honey. And they're like, I know exactly what that is. The broad match is basically like an enhanced exact match and it just crushes it. And it just significantly outperforms. You get way more volume. But what dynamic search ads, which everyone who doesn't know what that is, basically it uses landing pages instead of keywords. And it dynamically crawls the landing page and pops up for related search terms rather than giving keywords and popping up for related search terms. These both work as great keyword harvesting tools. So if you have a broad match campaign, you have a dynamic search ad campaign, and there's like particular search terms that are like crushing it, take those and put it in your exact match or your phrase match campaign. And that will start to grow and you'll know that it's like, those are high converters. The other ones I would say is like, when you're doing broad and phrase match, go long tail. Like it might sound kind of counterproductive because like broad, like you give it like dog beds and it'll find like everything related to dog beds, but like so think of each particular keyword or like word within a keyword as like an indicator for Google to come up with close match variants. So what I've particularly found is like, let's say I have cooling dog beds and then I have best cooling dog beds as like a prefix or like as a suffix. I say like cooling dog beds for large dogs. And just pretend like we're just using this example, those all had search volume. Like Google might give you the error, the thing in terms of the recommendations to like, oh, remove repetitive search terms or keywords to make account management easier. And I think that is a bad recommendation because what I found is like adding that best prefix in front of like the cooling dog beds opens yourself up for so many more best related search terms for cooling beds, and it will ultimately open up your scale. So like I would even advocate going long tail on broad and phrase match, as well as you could go kind of just short consolidated, but that will open you up to more volume. Yeah, you nailed it on in terms of segmentation. Like if you're segmenting, like let Google decide what locations are best, what audience are best, as long as it makes sense for your business and you're like, don't have any restrictions around that. Let Google kind of decide. Even if you're running, like I run some products that are like specifically for an older demographic, like 40 to like 65. And I will still run in a younger, like maybe I'll exclude 18 to like 24, 25, whatever it is. But if I really want to scale, I would open that up because you never know like who's using that particular device. Like they could be a family shared device or whatnot. And as long as you're giving Google enough data and you're confident within that, like Google is going to realize that like those people are less converting, but there's still some people within that niche that will convert. Within that demographic. So you're missing out on a fraction of incremental conversions. Two more tips would be think about the awareness aspect. So there's a lot of like accounts that are or industries that are significantly capped in terms of volume. Like there's only a finite amount of people looking for, let's just say, the cooling dog beds, or just yoga, let's just say yoga in general. But if you're able to create some brand awareness, and what that would look like is maybe running like a YouTube prospecting campaign, or now maybe Performance Max will help with this because it runs on the YouTube network. You're going to see this trickle down effect with your search campaigns. You're going to also see that, like, let's say one of your competitors starts running, say you run like a yoga related product, like a yoga mat or something. And there's a finite people looking for yoga. It's actually been declining in the last year. And one of your competitors starts running like $1 million in Facebook spend. Like, like that's going to increase traffic for the whole niche. So I think about that. And then the last one is like CRO, like work on conversion rate optimization, like conversion rates, like get more for what you're paying. Like just because you're satisfied with your ROAS, my recommendation would be don't settle when it comes to landing pages, like constantly be testing. And then this goes into the one aspect of like, I think you used that example of like a 500 per day budget. Well, what if instead of getting like, say, let's say like 20 or 100 conversions, actually that'd be really efficient. Let's just say you're getting 50 conversions per day on that 500 budget. Like what if you increase your conversion rates by even like 0.5% or 1% just through testing? That could get you a lot more for your money. And the second aspect of that is like what I always say is like never give up on a keyword that you truly believe is relevant to your business or product. I think a lot of managers in terms of growth will get into this position where it's just like, oh, this keyword is just not efficient. Like we've been trying, it's just not working. Like not thinking about like the actual experience. It's like if you have like cooling, like large gray cooling dog beds and that search term, you're like, oh, I'm just going to negate it because like it's just super inefficient even though it has high volume. But like you're like, I have that product. It's like, well, that is your problem to figure out the conversion rate issue, because that's where your real growth is. Like don't give up on it, fix the conversion rate issue, and then ultimately you'll be able to grow more. So yeah, those are some of my recommendations. But yeah, I think it's common thing to look at. But
love it. All right. Well, there's definitely some gems in here. All right, to break it down and share some notes with the folks. Is there anything you want to wrap up with? I think that's all we have on the list, unless you have anything else.
last quick question. I'm always keeping a list of some kind of e-commerce, D2C brands, or just brand businesses in general that you're kind of watching now. Is there any like top of mind that you would think, or for everybody to kind of keep an eye out on and see what they're doing? You really like what they're doing in marketing and whatnot?
Yeah. So are you familiar with Mudwater?
Yeah, yeah, I love them. There's just on the e-commerce fuel podcast.
Okay. I feel like it has like all the elements of like a great D2C brand. It's like a founder story where he like identified his own pain point and created a product around it kind of organically.
Sure.
I feel like they have found this kind of like niche of the market, which is folks who don't necessarily want to consume that much caffeine every day in the coffee market. And it's like an alternative. I would say Four Sigmatic kind of falls in that realm as well. They're probably more of a coffee brand than Mudwater is, but they've kind of created their own market out of just an audience that was like just looking for a product in that. And then I just love their branding. Like when you have a Mudwater product and you get the package, I feel like go above and beyond from the whole experience to like opening up it's like an Apple experience when you open up like your first MacBook. It's a whole thing. So I the Mudwater.
Yeah.
Yeah, I use their I think it's Mud Rest. It's for the evening like wind down, and has like
mushroom.
yeah, it has like valerian root and like reishi mushroom. And I like it because it doesn't have melatonin. A lot of the products on the market that are like nighttime supplements are actually just like heavy melatonin. And I think Huberman has talked about Dr. Andrew Huberman. He's like a sleep psychologist and scientist, has talked about the potential impacts of melatonin in rat trials and how it's decreased their testosterone like by quite a bit. So I try to I take melatonin on occasion, but I try to just avoid it and try to just do more like natural options. And anyways, Mudwater doesn't have melatonin, so I really like it. So them for sure is like at the top of my list right now for D2C brands that I think are crushing it.
Cool. Yeah, Mudwater, the unofficial sponsor of today's podcast. No, I actually had it on my list too because I think it's a great brand. I think they do kind of the culture or the culture type thing where it's like really people like that are ex coffee drinkers. The other thing I think they do really well is so the mushroom niche I know really well. I've worked with the client closely for a while now on that, and that mushroom niche you think is such a great niche, but it's growing. And I think it has future potential, but it's very limited in their search volume. So I think what Mudwater does really well is they're not just a mushroom company. They're opening up to ex-coffee drinkers or coffee drinkers, which is like exponential. It's so much larger than that kind of mushroom niche. And that's where they really get into it, especially with getting like social ads to convert and whatnot. So I think they do that really well. I think the experience, I never bought the products, but as you're mentioning, like I love to get particular D2C products and like have opening that package, like an experience, like have a pamphlet you read and like why you're taking this. And that really gets the kind of the retention up there and the lifetime value. And ultimately that gets your CAC up. And if you can spend more to acquire a customer, then you're ultimately going to win in the marketing world.
Yeah.
So you have that advantage. So yeah, I think they do it really well. Yeah, no, cool. Yeah, no, I think it's great.